Ignite Fredericton, Larry Shaw, and Don, I'm going to ask you to do the introduction for me, please.
Certainly, Madam Chair. So this evening, Larry Shaw from Ignite, previously Ignite Fredericton, is going to talk to the board about developments in economic development. Larry and I have known each other for many years, and not so long ago down in St. John, there was an initiative start to gather momentum with respect to consolidation of economic development activities. And we watched that together and wondered what it would be like if it ever happened here in Fredericton. You'll note that in your package, there's a copy of a letter to the chair from the Minister of Post-Secondary Education, Training and Labor, and the Minister of Local Government Reform. If I were to summarize that, I would say it's kind of an indication for you folks to think about how you might collaborate on economic development. And there's a pretty clear suggestion that if you did in a way that interested the two ministers, there might be some significant funding available to help along the way. So Larry and his team have put together a presentation that's for discussion purposes. I won't take that. I won't say much more about that. But what I will say is that we were talking about all the different views of economic development. And classically, what most people think of as economic development is a small section of economic development, and it's called foreign direct investment. And Larry drew my attention to a short video, it's about 3 minutes long, that folks in Manitoba did. And I'd like to play it for you for context this evening before Larry takes over for his presentation. And it's done in kind of a neat way. So I'll share my screen here now and just press play on that. Share.
Okay, next question. Explain economic development. The Cambridge Dictionary defines economic development as the process in which an economy grows or changes and becomes more advanced, especially when both economic and social conditions are improved.
Yeah, that doesn't help, does it?
Who are you?
I'm Dana. You can think of me as your tutor.
Do you know what economic development is?
Rather than tell you what economic development is, why don't I show you? Follow me.
Have fun, buddy.
Would you like an ice cream?
Yes.
Ice cream. That's economic development. You see this ice cream shop? The owners moved to this country just a few years ago with the dream of opening this place. They used local milk directly from area farmers. When locals and tourists buy that ice cream, the owners make more money, and then they pay their employees who spend that money in this city.
Thanks.
That's economic development.
Economic development tastes good.
Yes, it does. It turns out the ice cream is so popular, they opened an ice cream factory. We call that business retention and expansion. And they hired people with expert skills in ice cream from all around the world. Their ice cream has now gone international. Many of these people moved here from all over the world to work for this ice cream company. We call that talent attraction. Our city has become so well known for ice cream that we recently got a new slogan.
I now declare our city the ice cream capital of the universe.
Now we get to tell everyone how cool our city is, which is great for tourism. This year, our city is hosting the International Association of Ice Cream Makers Convention. Thousands of people are coming here to learn about it. And because we're so well known for ice cream, companies from around the world have moved here too, so they can get a scoop of the action. We call that foreign direct investment. We were able to convince an international cone company to move here to make cones for all the ice cream we're selling.
Well, it only makes sense to be where the ice cream is. Besides,
This city has a great quality of life.
What does quality of life mean?
Good question. For economic development to happen, a city has to provide things that make people happy. People that work here want to enjoy their life. They want nature, things to do, good schools, and community.
I love this place.
So, do you understand what economic development is now?
Yes, it all starts with ice cream.
Right.
And making the place you live awesome.
Great answer. My work here is done.
So that is, there we go. So that, I think that's as good an introduction as I can give you, Larry. It's over to you, and your team. You and your team should have control of the screen now.
Awesome. Thanks, Don, and thank you, Madam Chair. And it's a pleasure to be here and recognize all the members from RSC 11. The video that you saw, what I'm going to try to do is fill in some of the pieces as it relates to our region around that video and talk about what the regional approach could be and what economic development opportunities that we have. With me this evening that's going to help me and answer all the tough questions that I'm sure you guys will all have is Sarah Corey Holohan. She's the director of our growth services. And we have Adam Peabody. Adam manages all of our entrepreneurial activity within Ignite. So again, it's a pleasure to be here. And I thought maybe the place to start is really just sort of expand upon the thought and concepts of economic development. And look, it really is complex, and in a lot of cases, it can be very confusing. There's a lot of players in the economic development field. It takes a lot of departments and a lot of players to actually be effective at economic development. But really, to understand economic development, I try to describe it this way. It isn't really about the commercial activity that happens. That is very important. It's an integral part of economic development. It's really about making those strategic investments that increase the investment in our area. And that doesn't necessarily mean just foreign direct investment or new companies moving into our area. It's really looking at the attributes that are within a region, and how do you bring those attributes to fruition in a way that it multiplies the net outcome of what we're trying to do. So when you look at the region for a moment, I think it's important to recognize what we're talking about for a region's perspective. Region is really about the footprint or the area that represents the region, the interdependencies that can be utilized during economic development interests. So if you look at RCS 11 as an example, what we want to try to do is understand the commercial traffic and the commercial activity within the region, but also look at the inherent and intrinsic opportunities and value that is in this region. Each and every community is important to the region, and there's intrinsic value that is represented by those communities. So really, we want to make sure that we're involving the stakeholders, those that know best of the opportunities and value within each region. And that's what we've been doing for quite some time now at Ignite. We've been doing it with New Maryland and Oromocto in the city of Fredericton. But that's never really controlled how we approach economic development. The economic development that we work on, it's really client-based. So a lot of cases, the clients fall outside of those geographic boundaries today, and we don't just simply stop working with them because they may be in a different jurisdiction. We try to make sure that we focus on clients. So the thing that, just to sort of put the objectives around today's meeting is really, we want to take some time to inform you of changes that's happening. Don mentioned some of those. You've already seen and heard things from the province of New Brunswick where they're looking to regionalize opportunities. They're looking to, municipal reform is back at the top of the agenda. And I want to make sure that we understand municipal reform is important to the process, but it's not really important to the economic development aspect. We have to be sensitive to them. We need to be aware of it. But economic development should handle or should stand on its own, and it shouldn't need necessarily municipal reforms. Again, it's not to say we shouldn't be sensitive to that. It's just is put it in context. So what we really want to try to achieve this evening is help you understand what some of those driving factors are. Also understand the opportunities that come from regionalization and how that affects the whole area as well as each and individual communities. So we want to also begin the process, hopefully, to refine what our regional economic development framework looks like. Each and every one of you at the table will be part of that process and part of that conversation, but also other folks and organizations in your regions or in your communities that have value to bring to the conversation of economic development and how we can position tools and assets in a way that makes a sustainable growth for all of us. We also want to gain your participation and support of this agenda or this movement. I think you'll see from the activity that's happening in St. John, there is a lot of opportunity. There's a lot of interest, and there's a lot of things that we have that we can talk about that we should bring forward to government to improve economic development in an area. And then finally, we want to make sure that we start the dialogue with this group to be able to go back to government and say or recommend how we want to proceed. So the first slide that I'd like to sort of expand upon is I really just titled as background. So I'd like to talk a bit about that. What is the current situation and what's happening or what's changing. And I'm not going to speak to each point on the slide, trying to maintain the limited time here, and really just pick on maybe some of the key components of the slide. So the provincial government is supporting an incentive of regional economic development model. That model builds upon the entire region and the stakeholders, whether you're a village, whether you're a town, city, rural community, or whether you're a local service district. In the context of economic development, as I mentioned before, the region is really defined by the footprint of the unique interdependencies and assets that we combine and that we can bring to bear for long-term growth sustainability. We also need to be aggressive around population growth. I think everyone on this call this evening would share and understand the need for population growth. We also have to realize that the market is changing very rapidly. Technology is impacting significantly, and we're no longer dealing with a local market. Even the smallest companies, even a small retail company, when you look at things like Amazon, there's competition coming at us from around the world. So it's really important that we prepare ourselves for that and that we actually deploy I'll call it strategies to best be able to manage through those types of impacts. Also, it's businesses they can establish themselves anywhere. COVID has enhanced that by demonstrating how remote work can be put in place very quickly. But it's also brought to bear the fact that businesses, they will move and they need to move where they can get access to support to help them grow, and that's important for us to make sure we understand that during an economic development planning cycle. And then the last point on this slide that I'd make is really economic development is about a long-term investment. It is about a marathon versus a sprint. I can't emphasize enough the need to have long-term view and long-term investments in economic development. The building of infrastructure, the workforce development, the population growth development, they're all critical to the success of economic development. Moving to the next slide. The first question that we might ask ourselves is why a regional view is critical. Why have a regional view? Well, in a real summary or just in a word, it's about scale. The regional view brings the scale, brings all of the value proposition that an entire region has, and allows you to step back to be able to look at the interrelationships and how a region can maximize its investments. It's about avoiding the duplication of services that sometimes happen. It's about making sure that we're identifying gaps in the infrastructure or gaps in the services or gaps, just in general from a business or an entrepreneur perspective. So the scale helps us see that and helps us realize how we can make those investments. The demographic changes, they're multiplying, the impact of everything that we do. If we don't bring population in a very aggressive way, then some of the demographic challenges we have are going to be quite profound. So again, the reason for regional view is really to look at the entire footprint, the economic development region, make sure we understand the value and the assets that are in in each of the communities, in each of the regions, and that we're looking ways to find pathways between those assets and make sure that we can maximize those. In a lot of cases, that's making sure that we have the right people at the table from support organizations, whether that be within the province or whether it be through academic infrastructure, or whether it be through just the normal infrastructure that a community actually needs to move themselves forward. In some case, that is technology. That's things like internet and Wi-Fi and connectivity and the bandwidth capabilities in rural jurisdictions, et cetera. Move to the next slide. So the next question that you might have in terms of thinking about regional economics, well, why Ignite? Well, Ignite was established for this very mandate. Actually, it's regional in its focus initially. It was working with Oromocton, Maryland, and Fredericton. It was branded as Ignite Fredericton, but a while ago we branded as just Ignite, recognizing that regionalization was going to catch momentum. It was going to be something that we would have to address, and we wanted to make sure that we were in the best position to be able to do that. It's also about getting us the strategic seat at the table. Well, Ignite has been recognized for quite some time as one of the higher performing economic development groups in the province. And we want to be able to make sure that we can bring that history and that performance that we've been able to do to the table that is the tables that are involved in the conversation of economic development. At a provincial level, Opportunities for Brunswick would be one of those examples. But on a regular basis, we have to sit at the table with ministers, with elected officials to make sure that we're influencing policy and that we're actually bringing the voice of the entrepreneurs to the table. We also have a range of economic development expertise that we do. Don mentioned some of those in the early comments around investment attraction, workforce development, things like that. But it's really about making sure we customize to the opportunity at hand, or to, in this case, the region or the communities that fall within the region. One of the most significant things that we work on is probably the top priority right now, and it has been for the last, I'd say, 18 to 24 months particularly, is population growth. And how do we manage population growth, and how do we make sure that our jurisdiction is attractive to immigration? Not only just immigration from around the world, but it's also retention of our own citizens. International students is a significant element with inside population growth, because it begins to check a number of points that are very important during the growth and economic development stage. It's also about focusing on the programming that we have and the capabilities in the business startup world. Entrepreneurs are our pathway to success in economic development. And an entrepreneur just isn't about a startup company. Entrepreneurs have companies from startup all the way through to large organizations. As an example, the McCain Foods or large organization at a provincial level, they're clearly entrepreneurs. They just happen to be a lot more mature. I'll move to the next slide, Sarah. So one of the things in economic development that we look to do is we try to make sure we maximize the models that are out there that are working very effectively around the world. That's another advantage of that Ignite has. We've had the experience to be able to be in this space for quite a few years now, and have built up an awful lot of expertise. The most effective economic development model that is out there is what's referred to sometimes as the hub and spoke. It's the recognition that there are multiple communities, multiple municipalities, multiple assets that are within an economic development footprint. And you have to be able to find ways of taking core assets and making those and bringing those to advantage of, in some cases, rural areas, but it's also bringing the value of the rural areas into the economic development in the industry zones. As an example, the supply and logistical channels or the supply of labor. And it's also the reverse of that, where businesses, entrepreneurs can be started in areas that are complementary and provide services into those hubs of the economy. And that's no matter where you go around the world, that's the most effective way of growing and expanding economic development. We also want to make sure that we're focusing on programs with success and expansion and expansion. So we look at population growth, as I mentioned before, entrepreneurial programming. There's also strategic initiatives, not to suggest that this is something that we should or want to do, but during the pipeline discussion, that was a strategic initiative that needed a regional conversation to be part of that. That particular opportunity obviously didn't move forward, but nonetheless, there's other strategic initiatives that we need to be involved in. And I think also we need to recognize that the future of work is really changing the groundwork that we all are experiencing. You can take a job now and put it almost anywhere in the world, and it flattens the world from a competitive perspective, and it recognizes what we need to do in terms of workforce development and how we need to prepare ourselves for remote work campaigns and things like what we're experiencing now. People are moving to our jurisdiction simply for quality of life and bringing their jobs with them, and that's really helpful and it's very a significant advantage for our region. We'll go to the next slide. So a new model. I wouldn't say it's really a new model. If you want to just jump into the next slide, Sarah, that'd be great. It's really about recognizing that. Again, there are multiple stakeholders, and each of those stakeholders need to be involved. It needs to be a transparent process. We need to recognize that, it isn't just about the city. It isn't just about an urban-rural conversation. It's really about how do we bring the value and proposition of all of the assets in the region. I can't stress that enough. So rural communities, unincorporated areas, cities, towns, and villages. But you also have at the same time, have to have a framework around that. There's certain services that need to be delivered in areas of this region that are different. I wouldn't suggest that what, Gagetown requires is the same that Chipman or Minto or Nakawik. What we have to be able to do is recognize that we can provide, I'll call it customized services to each of the communities where there are initiatives to work on and opportunities to move forward on. And we think that one of the best ways to do that is through a bit of a categorization of the region in terms of the size of the communities. And from the size of the communities, we then can customize the requirements. It isn't about one community having one type of service and another community having another type of service. It's about recognizing what the communities require and bringing services associated to that. So when we describe the new regional model, it's really about the representation of all of the rural communities, incorporated areas, cities, towns, and villages. If you want to flip to the next slide, Sarah, that'd be great. I just want to monitor the time. Are we doing good on time, Don?
No, you're doing good.
All right, thanks, Madam Chair. So the slide that you see now, it's really about what is the model and really how does it become practice. We see and we've experienced that there's really 6 components of economic development that really need to be all worked on almost at the same time. There is the workforce and population growth is really important, and they go hand in hand. Population growth without being able to modify your workforce to meet the requirements of today's environment. We need to ensure that both of those are in lockstep. Building capacity from a workforce perspective is really about the training and programs that we need to ensure that we're introducing. And each region is going to be different. There's different fundamental assets in a region that dictate what type of training and what type of response requirements are required by the academic or the educational infrastructure. Entrepreneur and business support. I mean, so a lot of times we see that as the core service offering that we work on. Entrepreneurs, if you look at, I mean, there's all kinds of stats we could get into, but 90% of the economy in Canada and certainly in New Brunswick, it's small to medium enterprises that are driving the economy by and large. We hear great stories, and they're all important for us to be part of when you have large firms moving into an area. But the reality is that if you focus on your existing marketplace, you focus on, the value that's in those assets, you can actually have a bigger impact from an economic development perspective. We've proven that time and time again in Fredericton, because one of the things we do with Ignite is really look at again, the opportunities and customize services so that we can focus on the small, medium enterprises. We were one of the first jurisdictions to launch recovery services during the early stage of COVID to make sure that companies were getting the support they needed during the impact of COVID. Tourism and marketing is critical as well. We have to tell our stories. We have to brag about those things that we have, and we have to make sure that we do it in a way that draws tourism to our communities. And maybe a good way to look at economic development sometimes from a tourism perspective, we really should look at how do we bring tourists here, and how do we bring, I'll call it, those services or those nice to do, fun to do things of communities, so that when somebody comes here, they stay for that 5th or 6th day. They stay for an extra 2 or 3 days. It's a lot easier to keep people here for a day than it is to bring them here the first time. So if you look at a regional level around tourism, we can make some really stellar offerings for people to be in this area. We shouldn't be a drive-through location. There's so many wonderful things. We look at the water system and the lake systems that we have, and just the character and culture that we have. Tourism and marketing needs a lot of attention. We should put a lot of energy behind that. And then there's funding programs. We see the need to work with all the partners, ONB and CBDC, all the players in the economic development front, because funding has to be right funding at the right time and the right size. And quite often what we notice, a lot of companies fail because they don't get the funding at the time they need. And then, of course, infrastructure. In today's environment, infrastructure a lot of times gets referred to as internet and data connectivity, and all those things are very important. But, we have to also have our basic infrastructure in place. And as communities, that's a significant partnership that you would bring into the economic development conversation, because you fight for infrastructure each and every day, and you recognize how important that infrastructure is to the success of your community. I'll take the next slide there, Sarah, please. So this slide just really is a graphic representation of the partners that have to be in economic development, have to be in the regional conversation. Opportunities Brunswick is a provincial organization, and it is, it's really where a lot of the heavy lifting strategies are, and, labor offsets and all those programs that they have the power to bring. The communities themselves, all of the people around the table, and part of this initiative or this call needs to be prioritized in the economic development, the integration of services. What is it that you need? You know best what it is. How can we help you provide that? So the communities are an integral element to a partnership that's required around economic development. Ignite, I think we have the ability and leadership role that we've been successful at. We bring the scale, we bring the access and a place at the table, and also in our area, in all of the province, we have CBDCs. They're a very critical part of having a holistic economic development strategy for this region. Move to the next slide, Sarah, and I'll move through these next slides fairly quickly. So again, why would you do it? You wouldn't do it if there isn't some benefits, obviously. So the benefits that that we focus on today and that we see is really about increased population growth. It's about the alignment of the resources that we have. It's about increasing job. It's about increasing economic development activity, not just commercial activity. It's leveraging, remote working capabilities. It's really looking at the broader assets that are in a community and how do you maximize those. And then, ultimately, it's about the collaboration among the rural and urban regions. In economic development, we try to stay away from an urban-rural debate. We try to stay away from, the conversations around municipal reform. They're all very important. They will happen, but we need to spend our energy making sure that the economic development opportunities are maximized. And quite often, they don't need to be in the same circles as some of those other initiatives that are underway. We need to make sure that they're isolated so that we can maintain focus on economic development. And it's really about improving overall business support. Every business out there, especially during COVID, has some level of requirement of support. And it's now that we need to make sure that we're showing all that energy. Next slide. The next couple of slides are really about how does this all happen? It's really going to come down to governance and all the people on this call, how we organize ourselves from a region perspective, and how we make sure that we're setting what I'll call a regional model up for success. We've done some work on this already and have some suggestions that would start the conversation. So really, it's about establishing an independent board, but the board has to be the transparent representation of the entire region. It is about making sure that we have all of the participating villages and towns and cities and rural communities, LSDs. All of those need to be represented. It's also about having a private sector focus and the representation on the Economic Development Board. And it's a demarcation point of having, representation from the entrepreneurial or private sector versus elected officials. Communities need to have representation, and in a lot of cases, we should look to the professionals inside the communities to provide that representation. Again, the intent is to not avoid the politics of a region. It's really to make sure that we separate those conversations so that economic development can focus on the assets and the things that we do well. And as my role as CEO of Ignite, I obviously report to the board, and another what we would call private industry approach is, as I do today with Ignite, I sit on the board as a director. We want to make sure that just on that last item on that last slide, you don't need to go back to it, that's fine, is really about the diversity and the inclusion. We want to make sure we are currently at Ignite we have great diversity and we have great inclusion in our employment profile. We need to make sure that profile transcends into the board as well. I'll go to the next slide. One of the things that will be very important in setting up a regional approach and making sure that the board has representation is really making sure that we do this through skill matrix of the board. So it's important to have cities and towns and villages represented from a representation or from an experience perspective. It's important to have rural communities, LSD representation. Again, we look to populate a good percentage of the board through the private sector. Those that run business are those best to determine how business expansion should be undertaken. We also need the professionalism at the board. We need to ensure that we have legal and finance and engineering and healthcare. All those industries need to be represented. And then, of course, I've mentioned diversity and inclusion. I'll go to the next slide because I'm trying to wrap up so it gives us enough time. So look, the keys to success. It has to, again, I can't stress transparency and inclusion enough. We have the opportunity, as in St. John. St. John has been sort of started first. To give you some scope and scale of that, the government's investing $10 million in St. John regional economic. There's every reason to expect that same type of investment here. When you look at the drivers of St. John and the drivers here, relative to population-based community, all of those things, there's no reason why the community of central New Brunswick regional area of RSC 11, however we want to describe that region, there's no reason that we shouldn't expect to get that same contribution and be able to make those investments with that ongoing 10-year investment that they've done in St. John. That's what we want to make sure we're ready to capture. So full transparency, we need to make sure we have full representation. We customizing and prioritizing what is important to Nakawik isn't going to be the same that's important to, Fredericton Junction or Tracy or another location. We have to have a long-term funding model that's established. Again, we'll look to St. John as to how they're framing some of that, just to give some insight. We've already been in a long-term funding model in our region, so I think we have some ideas of how to make that become successful and achieve that. It is really about collaboration. No one organization, no one community, no one city, no one town, no one region can be successful in today's environment. Collaboration is one of the more important skills that we all need to know how to do. Population growth, again, I would say that it has to be the number one priority of all the initiatives that we look forward to, or that we look to implement. And then the entrepreneurial development. We have spent 5 years, more than 5 years, but in the last 5 years, evolving the entrepreneurial support ecosystem. And we've become known in the province to be probably the preferred location for startup companies, and the preferred location because of the program that we have in place. That is the expertise that will be expanded into the entire region. And then of course, as I mentioned before, we are independent, and this should be independent from municipal reform, but it isn't. We're cognizant of municipal reform. We have to make sure that we're aware of what that direction is taking, but we need to move the economic development conversation forward independently. I think that's my last slide. If you want to just, yep. So I'm not sure how we're doing for time, but hopefully I left some time for questions.
Okay. And Dawn, my power just come back on, so I'm going to try to get into the meeting.
Yes.
And I'll ask you to, if anyone has their hand up for questions, would you look after that for me, please?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Okay.
So thank you, Larry. I believe Bev has a question, the Mayor of Millville. So you're still on mute, Bev.
Okay.
There you go.
Okay, Madam Chair.
Yes.
Can I ask a question, please? Okay, Mr. Speaker, on the CBDC funding, we have a friendship trail in the village of Melville. We're a small village, and the trail's been there probably for 20 years. It's 20 kilometers long. We have a lot of people coming from Ontario, and they've been using it a lot. So is there any funding that we can get? We need a couple bridges done?
Yeah, I don't know the answer of if there's any specific funding for that particular opportunity. Okay. What I can say though is on those opportunities, if there is funding to be had, we can certainly find that out, and more than glad to take on those initiatives. And part of it is setting the stage to be able to get that funding, if maybe not now, in the future. By a lot of times, funding is dependent upon other funding requirements, or depending on a certain condition to be in place. And we by being at the table of government, quite often we can influence those conversations.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Carson?
You're welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A question, I guess, first of all, Larry, could we get a copy of this presentation sent to us, each of us?
Absolutely. And
the second question would be, do you know of a rural model or an area model or exemplar that can talk to us about how we can help our newcomers become entrepreneurs, to keep them and develop their talents in a way which helps all of us?
Yep. Great question, and there is a really good answer to the last part of that last question. We already have that ready, and we are doing it with Ignite now, and that's part of the regionalization. We can expand those immigration support systems into the communities, and that's what the investment that the province is bringing through regional aid. So if we are successful in getting the $10 million or thereabouts over a 10-year model, part of the money will be spent in supporting those additional immigration tools and assets needed in your community as other communities in the region. We right now have a couple of programs where we bring newcomers into the community. They go into a settlement, but they also go into entrepreneurial development. We have dedicated programs for immigrants, and they can be easily deployed in any jurisdiction, in any community in the region.
Thank you.
Right, so other questions?
Yes, Don, I'd like to ask a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's Ian Kitchen, Maranaquik, Larry. I don't know if you're aware, but economic development has been a big thing in the last couple of years for us here. And we've, I don't know if you heard of Destination Naquik.
I have.
So do you think that we could coexist or exist under one umbrella, or how do you think that would work?
Absolutely. Look, it will work in whatever way you as a community want it to work. What regionalization isn't about dictating to NACWIC or any other community what you want to do or what you should do. It's about helping you understand how the opportunities align, what are required, and then having us help you achieve what those are. So in NACWIC's case, the economic development activity that you're already doing would be brought inside and partnered with the rest of the team in the same way that we're going to be working with the CBDCs. I met with the CBDC today, and they're fully aligned around the model that we're suggesting. It's really about focusing on the end requirement, the objective or the strategy, and making sure that we're supporting you under quite frankly your leadership in terms of what you want to accomplish in your community.
Okay, I know that right now we were looking at the St. John funding model, and it's like, well, and we've been told by the government that we're on the right track, but they don't seem to be wanting to give us any money right now.
Yeah, look, you are on the right track. I'm familiar with what you're doing there as well. And look, that's why we're here. That's why we're having this conversation. I think this is the pathway to uncover and unhinge those investments. The province is making regional economic development a priority. There is every reason to believe that if we align ourselves and we collaborate as an entire region, and that was the leverage or the lever that got pulled in St. John. All the communities are involved. They are all at the table. They all have joined, the strategy, and that I think is a prerequisite. And I'm quite comfortable that we're going to get there. And as a region, we want to celebrate when we are proud of something and when we've been successful. In the Fredericton region in general, the central region, the area that represents this footprint, that the regional footprint that we're talking about, has always swung well above its weight. We've always outperformed on a per capita basis, whatever way you want to measure it. And there's a lot of openness for the province for us to become involved in the same way that St. John is, because they know that the record, that the KPIs and the measurements that we put in place are actually going to be able to be used throughout the rest of the province.
Thank you, Larry.
Are there any other questions? Yes, John?
I don't really have a question, but I'd like to make a comment. I think I personally like it. I think it's a good idea, the regionalization for economic development. We started it years and years and years ago, and it kind of worked, especially for smaller communities. We're trying to do in our neck of the woods out here a lot of different activities, and especially tourism, because we have the river. We have a lot of people who come and visit. But we just don't know who to turn to. And if you have a small community like us with no staff, that leaves it on whoever seems to have the most time to try and find these people to talk to. And it's difficult in government to find the right people. So it would be much simpler if we could just pick up the phone and call Larry and his people and say, this is what we're trying to do. And they're pretty much aware anyway. But we just don't have that. And if every government department's getting 15 calls from different communities who really don't know how to fill out the paperwork, or don't, know what paperwork to fill out, and we've heard it already, like what could be available. I think it's a great idea to have Ignite, in my mind, do that. I mean, back when GFED first started, GFEDC.
That's it.
And Knowledge Park, I mean, that wouldn't have been created except for that back in the late 90s. So, you know, what has that done for not just Fredericton, but the entire area with Smart Force and all those other computer companies that came to town. And, you know, I think it's phenomenal because we have them living in our communities, the people who work there. So it's great. That's all I'd like to say.
Thank you, John. Does anyone else have any questions or comments they'd like to share? I don't see anyone's hand up. So that concludes the presentation. I'd like to thank you, Larry, and your staff members, Sarah and Adam. Thank you very much, and you were right on time too. So I didn't have to cut you off.
That's good. We'll leave the meeting then, and we'll follow up through Don's office and carry the conversation forward.
Absolutely. Thank you for your time.
Take care.
Thanks. So now we'll move on to number, it's hard to see, 7, the committee reports. The Finance Committee, Director Morrison, please.
Okay, good evening. The Finance Committee met on February 22nd, 2021. In attendance were myself, Mike Blaney, John Bigger, Susan Cassidy, Mike Chamberlain, and David. Let's see, David's the new guy on the Finance Committee, and look forward to working with him. Don Fitzgerald, Mary Kay Langdon, Brent McCrae, Stephen McLinden, and me and Colin Scars. The meeting was called to order by the chair at 5:09 p.m. The meeting began with a review of the fourth quarter and complete 2020 performance of the post-closure fund. At the end of the year, our investments were in compliance with the allocation targets specified in the investments policy statement. The full year return was 6.68%. This exceeds our targeted return by 1.84%. Over the past 2 years, since the investment policy statement was updated, the cumulative return is approximately 10%, as resulted in the elimination of the previous post-closure deficit. Our investment advisor, Tony Spares, then discussed the market expectations for the near term, which could be summarized as continuing volatility for the 2021 year. Ms. Langdon then reviewed the full year financial results and the variances to budget. She noted that these results, which are attached, are prepared under the municipal finance standards, and the audited results, which are prepared under the PSAB, will differ from this presentation. The results are materially the same as presented to the board in December when reserve recommendations were presented. Overall, the corporation experienced a deficit of $216,000 after reserve transfers. This deficit was due to the performance of the power generation fund. Under PSAB, the commission will be showing a surplus of approximately $400,000. There being no further business, the meeting was adjourned at 5:36 p.m. respectively submitted by myself. I move that the board receive the report of the Finance Committee dated March 2nd, 2021.
Second, Mike Chamberlain.
Any discussion? Ready for the question?
Question.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, Peter.
Okay.
We'll now have the Community Policing Committee by Director Cassidy, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Community Policing Committee met on March the 2nd. No, we didn't. Anyways, we met on February 26th, I believe it was. And this report is for information purposes only. It's not a complete reflection of what occurred at our community policing meeting, which included all of the different delegates from around the area. Directors may recall that at the December 2020 meeting of the board, that the committee advised it would be requesting the minister to come to a board meeting and discuss the quality of policing services being experienced in the region. A letter to that effect was issued on January 4th, 2021, and on February 17th, the attached response confirming that we would be contacted to arrange a meeting was received. In the February 2nd edition of the Northern Light newspaper, Public Safety was quoted as saying it had completed the review into policing arrangements in New Brunswick, and the report is expected to be released in the coming weeks. Good information. Upon follow-up, we have been advised by Public Safety that there is not a definite release date at this time, but we were assured that the commission was on the distribution list. The advisory forum will be meeting on Thursday, February 25th, not 6th, and the chair and the ED will, myself and Dawn will verbally update the board on that session at the March meeting. I move that the board receive the report of the Community Policing Committee dated March 2nd, 2021, respectfully submitted myself, Susan Cassidy.
I have a seconder.
I'll second it, Eleanor Lindsay.
Okay. Now, do we want to give the update now before the final vote done?
I believe that would be this would be a good time to have that discussion.
Okay. So, well, Dawn, did you want to go over the letter?
So, excuse me. So I guess the first thing that I would observe on behalf of the advisory forum is that we were kind of surprised at the RCMP attendance at the session on Thursday evening. Apparently we have a new inspector, of which we were unaware. Sergeant Shannon, who was the main, the key sergeant for our RSC, is on special assignment and has been replaced by another sergeant, of which we were unaware. And he was there to prepare and deliver the report that's attached in your package. And it was clear he hadn't read it. So it was good that they came. We have definitely lost the connection that we had from Sergeants Griffith and Andrea, where we would get together before the meeting and they would prepare jointly with the RSC staff. And so we need to reestablish that, I think, is the thing on a staff level that I took away from that. I can also update the directors that the letter said the minister's letter said someone will be reaching out to us, and that has happened. Dan Goodwin, who is the director of policing standards for justice and public safety, and I have been trading, a call and an email, and that just started to happen late yesterday afternoon, and we haven't connected yet. But I'm confident that we will. And the policing committee itself, the policing committee of the board, is meeting this Thursday night. And I'm hopeful that I'll have information. I'm not sure what Dan's ideas are with respect to what direction he's received from the minister in his office. But at least I have the sense that something is happening and or about to happen. I can advise that all of the commissions seem to be very much where we are with respect to policing. When my conversations with the executive directors, nobody's picking on us. That this is the experience throughout the province.
Across the board. Oh, and the new inspector is Chantel Farah. You may all recognize her name. She used to be the spokesperson that you would see on the news for this region. So she's now the inspector. And the new staff sergeant is Staff Sergeant Major Ian Grossman. And as Dawn just said, actually I would be a little more frank than that. I found that the letter from the minister's office was a tad discounting. They basically, it was just like a pass off, like, don't bother us. We'll get someone in touch with you, which is a little frustrating because I think really what's happening here is community policing doesn't exist anymore. And it's it's sad because I think a lot of places, like I know that even Erica has noticed a loss of that relationship with the officers, that used to patrol in the area and such, and that started disappearing all over. And it's, again, as Dawn just indicated, it's not just picking on us, but it's a systematic thing that is happening within the policing, within the province. And I'm not encouraged personally that all of the new bureaucrats with public safety are ex-RCMP. And so well, it might be a good thing. I shouldn't say that, and maybe it will be a good thing that they are. But like Mr. Goodwin is ex-RCMP, and he was actually, Don, if I'm not correct, he was the individual that hosted or chaired the info session in June of, was it 2018?
So many years ago, yes.
Yeah. So obviously he's been around, but we still haven't seen that report either. So I'm not too encouraged. But anyways, at that point, Madam Chair, I'll ask for you to call the vote.
No further discussion? Ready for the question? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, Susan.
Thank you.
Move on now to number 8, the annual departmental and staff reports. Executive Director's report. Don, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You have my report. There are a few things that I'd like to draw your attention to, some of them with subsequent developments where I can provide some additional context. First of all, in the area of governance, where I have a strategic goal of performing legislative analysis and briefings and keeping the board well informed about what's going on. The big deal there, of course, is the local governance reform initiative has begun, and the Department of Environment and Department of Governance, Local Governance Reform has launched a new website with respect to the activities around the process, and I've listed the hyperlink in my report, and I'll follow up with an email that makes it easily clickable for you. Information is going to be added to this regularly as we go through the process this year, and so I would encourage you to check back regularly. I will be doing that myself, and I'll advise of anything that I find that is significant. But the process is going to unwind this way. November of 2020 to February 2021, which is passed, was the startup period. In March, the government is expected to release its green paper. And the green paper, for just to sort of clarify, it's a paper issued by governments where they put out a bunch of ideas for discussion, and they call it a green paper so that we can't hold them to account for it. It's not recommendations it's not something they recommend. It's a thought-provoking paper. And so the things that will be in it aren't necessarily what they plan to do. After that, there'll be a period of public engagement, which will go on through March to June. And then there'll be a bit of break when the department digests all the engagement. And then in August or September, they plan to issue a white paper. So in government language, a white paper is, this is what we plan to do. And it's the first step towards significant legislative reform. So that's kind of the timeline that we're on. Structurally, there are going to be a number of working groups put together to work on different areas that will be part of reform. And they haven't been populated yet. But an advisory committee has been struck to work with the province. And that advisory committee is drawn up of significant stakeholders. So all of the municipal associations, which would be the Francophone Association, UMNB, the cities association, and the municipal administrators all have 3 spots on this advisory committee. The local service districts of the province are represented by 6 individuals that the minister has selected. And there are 2 RSC executive directors on the committee, and I'm one of them. And so after I wrote my report, we had our first meeting of the working committee. And from that, I can give a little more detail that is in my report. So this committee is going to operate during the whole process, during the year, and perhaps during implementation. And its role is to provide stakeholder feedback into the working groups and the steering committee inside of government. But there are going to be 5 chapters to the green paper and 5 areas examined as part of local governance reform. And that'll be structure, regional collaboration, land use planning, and financing. Each of those will have a working group put together. And that working group won't be selected until after the green paper is issued. But the advisory committee that I'm on will have some feedback or will participate in the nomination process to fill out those committees, the working groups. Now, each of those sections will be treated this way, and sort of the table of contents is a statement of how the existing system works, what other jurisdictions do in Canada, how they deal with those 4 areas, sort of detail what's been tried in the past, what's been recommended in the past, and then some suggestions as to what we might consider. So that'll be the meat of the green paper, that last part. Now, to give you an idea of the kinds of things that may be included, there was some discussion around structure. And so I'm going to give you some options now, and you might find them challenging. They're not necessarily going to be part of the green paper. They're concepts that were relayed to me. They're not my idea. But in terms of structure, some of the things they're talking about is organizing the province around 12 regional municipalities, or Finn's 50 municipalities, or any number in the middle of that. They're also talking and considering what targeted restructuring around service centers might look like. And then they're also looking at what it would be like if we took the entire unincorporated areas of the province and divided them up into 12 regional municipalities. Any or all or none of those may make its way into the green paper. But these are the things that are being thought about, being researched by the people who are writing it. And since it's March the 2nd, and the issue date for the green paper is considered to be March, we have to think it's reasonable to assume that much more than the table of contents has been written at this point in time. I talked about the public consultation. I talked about the advisory committee being active through the process. And Madam Chair, perhaps I would break there in sort of the summary of my report, because local governance reform is a significant item that's going to impact all of us. And if any of the directors had any questions, I could deal with that issue before I move on.
Sure. Does anyone have any questions or comments for Don? Mike?
Mike here. Thank you, Madam Chair. Don, in reading over the advisory committee, I have a couple of comments to make. Number one, it seems like the LSDs are underrepresented. And it also seems to me that the role the RSCs are going to play is minimal. Would you like to comment on that?
Right. So I'm not sure how the distribution, why only 6 local service district representatives were selected from the province. So that decision was made before I was approached. Whether they're, I guess it's a matter of opinion whether they're over or underrepresented. I mean, about 1/3 of the province lives in unincorporated areas, and this is 6 people of 20. So I don't know. I don't think anyone on that group would be adverse to more. And I don't know if that's a decision that's carved in stone at this point in time. With respect to the regional service commissions, the water cooler talk that I hear, which we have to be very careful about water cooler talk, because, within 5 minutes you can hear opposing ideas and people will put them forward as the gospel, is that RSCs will be asked to do much more after local government reform than they're being asked to do now. But that's just, I've heard that from some people inside local government, the Department of Local Government, and I'm not sure they know how it's going to work out. It is true that the only local government structure that we have in the province that has a view of everyone, incorporated, unincorporated, rural communities, the only group that has that view is the 12 boards of the Regional Service Commission. So I don't know. Mike, I'm hoping that RSCs will play a broader role after review, but my crystal ball hasn't always been good.
After is not now, though, is it?
No.
Thank you, Don.
Hey, Carson. You're on mute. You're on mute. You're on mute. There.
I've unmuted myself. The question about the 400 to 500 inspectors, of course, caught my eye in the circumstances.
Right. So with respect to that, there have been changes to the act, to the implementation of the Building Code Administration Act, and the responsibility for that has moved from local government, where it has been for many, many years, to the Department of Public Safety. And the changes were implemented and proclaimed, and municipalities and regional service commissions who do this kind of work throughout the province found out 5 days after the fact. And we had absolutely no input into the changes. And there are a couple that are really concerning to us collectively. And the first one has to do with size of a structure. So Stephen can speak to this in more detail than I can, but after a certain number of square feet, you're going to have a building permit and an inspection, and it's much lower than the case is now. And so that's going to generate a lot more building permit activity and inspections for us. The other thing that changes is no longer will you have to have a building permit for an electrical permit. And so that threshold was an enforcement threshold that prevented people from building a house without a building permit and getting electricity. And so we're very concerned about that. And the provincial planning directors and the New Brunswick Planners Association have written the minister and the technical enforcement person assigned to this, expressing displeasure on the behalf of municipalities and regional service commissions who do this work, and asking for a meeting to discuss the issue. But there's no question our workload is going to increase dramatically the way it's structured now.
Thank you.
Mike?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, Don, do you have any idea why that was done? I mean, that was a fail-proof way of people having to get building permits. Any idea whatever instigated this?
I don't have any idea. I think it's fair to say that we were all shocked, and Stephen may be able to comment on that a little more specifically, but I was really surprised.
It makes no sense.
Stephen? You're on mute, Stephen. More than just your mic, Stephen.
Okay, there we go.
There.
Thanks very much, Madam Chair. Yeah, we've been after the province since 2015 to adopt this code. And they're all, this province has always been behind. The 2010 we've been using. The Fire Marshal's office has been using the 2015 since 2 years ago. The hotel out in Hanwell, for example, the Marriott, Fire Marshal and us they were used 2015, we used 2010. Now we're on the same page. So we have had some discussions with the province last September, but they never listened to us. And they went ahead and implemented this adoption of the new code. And now, as Don had said to me the other day, the ship has sailed and we have to live with it, and we will do our best to execute the enforcements and inspections.
Thank you, Stephen. Anyone else have any questions at this time or comments? Yes, Leo? Or your hand's not up? No, sorry. Okay. It's hard to see here. Okay, Don, there's no further questions at this time.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So moving on, I can let you know that we did have the landfill environmental impact assessment public hearing. It was like many of these things, it was attended primarily by those who are passionate about issues, and there were people who were in favor of what we were doing and some who weren't. Most of the people who weren't were basing their objection on odor. Odor tracking, as I say in my report, is perhaps more complicated than odor suppression. And so as a result of what we've heard, we've made some operational changes that I think that you folks should be aware of, because you will bump into people who will complain from time to time. And I'd like to invite Brett to more accurately describe these changes than I could.
Sure, thanks, Tom. What we've done, so first of all, to put it in context, we hadn't received prior to this public consultation meeting a single odor complaint since the middle of 2016, I believe. So this was a relatively new thing for us, but they've been coming in fairly steadily from a core group of people, participants in the meeting since. What we do is similar to what we used to do prior to the implementation of our gas collection and management system. We're currently taking all of the complaints. We ask for their exact location. We then log the date, time, wind direction. All of that's processed by an engineering consulting firm that we have contracted and rolled into monthly reports. Now, of course, because the public meeting, the public consultation took place towards the end of January, we're just closing in on getting our first monthly report. But anecdotally, about half of the complaints are lining up as far as wind direction, half, possibly a little less. The other half, or 60%, seem to be, again, those are rough numbers, coming when the wind is blowing from opposite directions. That may be a useful tool for us in trying to figure out where these odors are coming from. Of course, there is no such thing. We've sent staff out as well at the time of the complaints, and myself included, and we've been unable to detect any odor. So it's been interesting. We've also increased the frequency of cover. Hopefully that will help reduce the odors. We've discussed this a lot lately, and the last point I'll make just briefly as far as current changes, we do take this all very seriously. We are looking at measures that we can take in addition to what we're doing now. We're doing these windrow models to try to figure out where the wind would be dispersed should the height increase be approved. But the real thing here is if they're smelling fresh garbage, there's essentially very little we can do about it. We're in the business of managing waste that's in the ground. We can't make the fresh garbage smell any differently than when it leaves the house. But we are looking at what measures that we can do as far as increased cover materials, and that's really where we are right now. Don? Thank you, Brett.
So we're trying to take a science-based approach. From time to time, we perhaps rest on our laurels a little bit, casting our mind back to 15 years ago and what it smelled like to drive past the landfill. It's not anything like that anymore, but we do take the notice seriously, as Brett said, and we're looking at all the reasonable mitigation measures that we can do. We talked about the policing service in the committee report, the Building Code Administration Act. We talked about that. We're in terms of operational issues, it's been a busy period. First part of the year has been busy. We're trying to optimize the gas collection, dewatering projects at the landfill. We're in the laboratory with regards to trying to put together a feasibility study on enhanced organics management. We have what we believe is a forward-looking organics management system, and we're looking to improve that based on some new to us concepts. And we hope that we'll be coming back to this body in this year, looking to get authorization to do a proof of concept. On the planning and development side, we talked about the increased workload that we're going to have this year, but things are busy. We have 6 rezonings in process now, and last year, the entire year, we only did 5. We have people coming from out of province. Larry referred to it in his conversation. They're attempting to buy real estate. They're inquiring how do things work in New Brunswick. They have a realtor, but they're looking for someone who's not commercially interested in the purchase transaction. And so our development officer is spending a lot of time there. And a lot of us, we've been home with COVID for a long time, and we're renovating, and we're certainly seeing that here. And I can tell you, I don't have a bathroom on the main floor right today as we speak. I'm driving part of this increase as well, and I'm not the only one. So we've been busy at the landfill, and we've been busy in planning. Finally, in my report, I included for information promotional item on New Conversations, which is a thing being done by the Multicultural Council, along with some of the better known names in our province, economic names, David Campbell and Richard Salian, with respect to attracting people, immigration. And I referenced the list of times that the Central New Brunswick ones were going to be held. It's a log-on thing. Could be interesting. I'm going to attend it, and we'll be able to update the board for those who either can't see it or aren't interested in it. But it's a parallel initiative to workforce attraction, which Larry referred to. And so, Madam Chair, that's the end of my report. I'll take any comments, answer any questions that the directors may have.
Does anyone have any questions or comments for Don? Mike? You're on mute. So, do you have a comment, Mike?
Just trying to get unmuted, okay?
Okay, yes.
I just had a quick question, Don, or maybe Brett, on the if this organic thing, the composting thing goes through, what effect will that have on our generating capacity, or is it anybody's guess?
You want to take that, Brett?
Yeah, sure. What we're looking at, Mike, is now, and you said it, it's a great example. When people think organics management, they do think composting. We're not confining ourselves to that when we're looking at options for organics. Our preference, actually, as you know, we've got an extensive gas collection infrastructure in place. And we're looking for technologies that might be a little more compatible with the existing infrastructure. And one of those might be anaerobic digestion. If you're not familiar with the concept, and I'm just throwing this one out as an example, but that approach achieves the same positives that you would see in a composting program. However, it's slightly different in that it's done in a vessel, in an enclosed vessel. So the material is still composted, but you're able to harvest the gas off of it. And in that kind of a scenario, that technology could be used to actually supplement our gas stream. So there are a lot of different options out there, a lot of new technologies. We've got a world-class engineering firm working on that out of Waterloo that we've used over the years on our gas system. They've got international experience and exposure. So there may not be a decrease in gas flows from it. We may have options to actually supplement our gas flows with an organics system.
I'm just wondering if the government, if the province realizes the adverse effects this could have on our operation.
That's a good question. I'm not sure.
Okay, thank you.
That's Brett's being polite.
I know.
No. And that was, as you know, that was the purpose of this board's letter to the minister.
Thank you.
Does anyone else have any questions? Yes, Chris.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Don or Brett, your choice, or both, or neither. Obviously, the people that are concerned about the dump are people that live fairly handy to me in the Lincoln area. I have spoken to them. I do know that they have concerns, and I know that they've emailed, which I've encouraged them to do, either me or Brett directly. A couple of the quick questions that I had, though, are what is going to be the size of the working area on the top of the potential future builds there? And the studies that are being done on wind, are they being done at that height?
So I think Brett can give the most detailed answer to those questions.
Thank you.
Thanks, Don. Chris, to answer your first question, as far as surface area goes, we typically build 1-year cells. And so the surface area of any given cell has to do with its the geometry on its edges. So you've got that 4-to-1 slope near a peak. It also has to do with the depth of that cell, right? And so by going up higher, currently we're doing fairly shallow cells, and so they have a large footprint, and they're only about 8 to 10 meters deep, say. By going higher, we'd actually be able to do a deeper cell. We expect that surface area would be decreased. To give you an exact size, I wouldn't be able to do that right offhand, but these are much smaller than what you'd see on our, as an alternative. Say this proposal doesn't go through. Our next proposed cell is I'd mentioned to the board, I believe in December, estimated to cost approximately $2.3 million. It's got a huge footprint, and so it would obviously have a comparatively larger surface area. As far as the studies go, for wind, we've done our current data shows an increased wind shear at that elevation of approximately 6%. And there's no clear indication that that would have an adverse effect on odors coming from the landfill. There are a lot of different variables as far as odors coming, and it's not necessarily that the wind is the biggest one of them. Reducing your cell surface area, for example, has a massive impact as well. Having said that, the study that we're undertaking with GHD right now is much more sophisticated, and we're building complex models, including the geometry of that final landfill, should it be approved, the final landfill shape, the cover materials used, the gas collection efficiency, and this is really sophisticated stuff. To give you an idea, I'm very confident that nobody else in Atlantic Canada has undertaken a study of this complexity, and it's going to generate some really interesting data showing where those odors may migrate given the various wind conditions and the predominant wind conditions. Who can expect to see odors from that? So we're hoping to come out of this with an improved operation. Now, keep in mind too, Chris, one of the biggest mitigators of odor in going up higher is the fact that we're essentially encapsulating or entombing the old landfill cells underneath. And so we've currently got over 2.5 million tons of garbage in place in the ground, all producing gas. By going higher, we're going to essentially put a cap right on top of all those cells, permeable layer or boundary, and then we're going to insert all our gas collection technology into that. State-of-the-art stuff. And now the model will tell the story, but we're pretty confident that you're going to end up with a reduction in odors, not an increase.
Perfect. Thanks, much appreciated.
You're
Thanks,
welcome.
Madam Chair.
You're welcome, Chris. Anyone else have any questions or comments? Let me just down.
Question. Just before we leave, I think we're probably toward the end. The presentation we had tonight was so small. Could we get the full sheets? That's what I was asking about from the presenter tonight. Not the encapsulated ones, the big full-size ones. That's what I wanted when I made that request.
So, Madam Chair, while this meeting was going on, I forwarded the actual presentation to all of the directors. So you should have that in your email box now.
Is it full size, not the
Yes.
truncated size like these ones?
Yeah, no, it's not 3 to a page.
So it's full size. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So no further questions for Dawn. Thank you very much, Dawn. I'll move now to number 9, the staff report, the letter from the Regional Service Commission 9. And everyone's had a chance to read that letter over, and under the recommendation is no action is recommended at this time. So Brett, do you have anything else to add to that?
No, Madam Chair, I think you've covered it. The only thing I would add is that this is a problem that's going to resolve itself through finalization of the federal regulations within 2021. So it's a short-term problem.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions on that?
Madam Chair, if I might, just before you open to the directors, Brett is being a bit modest. I had asked him to speak directly to the 5th paragraph, which says that all RSCs are having difficulty selling these plastic bags and they can't be recycled. But that's not the case for us. We have a very aggressive team on the recycling side looking for markets, and we've been able to move this material. So the problem that's described in this letter doesn't exist in your region.
Thank you, Don. Okay, Bev, did I see your hand up? Okay, Bev.
Yes, I just like a motion, not a motion, but just a mention that Brett is doing an excellent job. Equipment, landfill, and so on. He's doing an excellent job. Thank you.
You got the thumbs up, Brett. Thanks, Bev.
Thanks, Bev.
Does anyone else have any comments on this? I don't see anybody's hand up. So could I have a motion to adjourn?
Shall move.
Bev, second by Bob Powell. Meeting's adjourned. Thank you, everyone. And you know,
Thank you.
I've always wondered what would happen if I didn't have any power. And my generators down at my daughter's place said, guess what? I found out the hard way. But thank goodness it did come on after